Bernina Express. The Bernina Express holds the title of the highest adhesion railway in Europe, and the distinction matters because it climbs without a single rack or cog to assist it. From Chur in Switzerland to Tirano in Italy, the train crosses the Alps using pure friction between steel wheel and steel rail. Ascending to 2,253 meters at Ospizio Bernina, before descending into the warm Mediterranean light of the Italian foothills. The journey threads through 196 bridges and 55 tunnels across a route that was planned from the very beginning, not as a utility corridor, but as a tourist machine. When the Albula section opened in 1904 and the Bernina section followed in 1910, the engineers specified slender stone pillars and narrow arches, so the viaducts would sit inside the landscape, rather than interrupt it. The line was electrified from the start, which meant no coal smoke obscuring the glaciers. In 2008, UNESCO granted the Rhaetian Railway World Heritage status, recognizing not just the tracks, but the specific relationship between the engineering, the architecture, and the land it crosses. The route's most celebrated structure appears south of Bruzio, where the track drops faster than adhesion traction can safely manage. The solution was the Bruzio Spiral Viaduct, a 9-arched stone loop that performs a full 360-degree turn within a radius of 70 meters, allowing the train to lose 38 meters of elevation in a confined space while holding the gradient at exactly 70 per mil. The train crosses over itself. Passengers on one side look down at the carriage they were sitting in moments before. The Bernina Express runs year-round through landscapes that shift from permanent glaciers to palm trees within 4 hours, a compression of climate zones that no tunnel connection could replicate. Glacier Express. The Glacier Express markets itself as the slowest express train in the world, and the claim is accurate. The 291-kilometer journey between Zermatt and Sri Moritz takes 8 hours, an average speed that a determined cyclist could approach on flat ground. The route crosses 291 bridges and passes through 91 tunnels as it traverses the central spine of the Swiss Alps through the cantons of Graubünden, Uri, and Valais, reaching its highest point at the Oberalp Pass at 2,033 meters. The line opened on 25 June 1930 as a seasonal service, and its most dramatic structure predates the express service itself. The Landwasser Viaduct is a 6-arched curved bridge that sweeps directly into the mouth of a tunnel carved into a vertical cliff face. The main pillars were assembled without scaffolding, using a crane method that was unusual for the early 1900s. The precision required to place stone on stone at that height, curving into solid rock, represents a standard of construction that the surrounding Alps seem to demand from anyone who attempts to cross them. The operator eventually transformed the train's defining limitation into its primary product. The Excellence Class carriage features champagne glasses engineered with a modified base, so they do not tip on a 35 per mil gradient, and serves a 7-course meal across a journey that takes most of a working day. Flamsbana. The Flamsbana descends 863 meters in 20 kilometers, giving it an average gradient of 55 per mil and making it the steepest standard gauge railway in Europe. It connects the mountain station at Myrdal to the shores of the Orlandsfjord at Flam, and the engineering required to make that descent safe on standard gauge track determined almost every decision made during its construction. Each train carries 5 independent braking systems. This is not redundancy for comfort. It is the minimum mechanical provision that allows a standard gauge passenger service to operate on a slope where a single brake failure would be catastrophic. Construction began in 1923 and was completed in 1940, the final years coinciding with the German occupation of Norway. The workers who cut 18 of the 20 tunnels by hand through Norwegian granite advanced at roughly 1 meter per month, per crew. One tunnel spirals 180 degrees inside the mountain, a turning loop that allows the train to gain height within the rock rather than on the exposed face of the valley wall. The power source for the entire railway is the hydroelectric station at Kjosfossen, which draws water from the waterfall the train stops to observe midway through the descent. The view generates the electricity. West Highland Line. The West Highland Line runs 264 kilometers from Glasgow to Mallaig on the western coast of Scotland, crossing a landscape of dark lochs, treeless moorland, and mountains that receive enough rainfall to qualify as a temperate rainforest. It passes beneath Ben Nevis, at 1,345 meters, the highest peak in the British Isles, and terminates at a small fishing port that can only be reached by rail or by sea. The Mallaig extension, completed in 1901, required a series of large viaducts across the Highland Glens. The project's engineer, Robert McAlpine, chose mass concrete as the primary material, a decision that earned him the name Concrete Bob from an industry still accustomed to brick and stone. The Glenfinnan Viaduct spans 380 meters across the head of Loch Shiel on 21 concrete arches, each rising to a maximum height of 30 meters. At the time of construction, it was the longest concrete railway bridge in Scotland, and it was built in a location that had already carried historical weight since 1745, when Bonnie Prince Charlie raised his standard there at the start of the Jacobite Rising. The viaduct became globally recognizable in 2001, when the Hogwarts Express crossed it in the first Harry Potter film. The same sequence appeared in 3 subsequent films. The steam tourist service, the Jacobite, now carries passengers specifically to witness the crossing in person. An estimated 250,000 visitors arrive at Glenfinnan each year. The Ghan covers 2,979 kilometers between Adelaide in the south of Australia and Darwin on the northern coast, bisecting the continent from temperate to tropical across terrain that resisted European settlement for the better part of 2 centuries. The journey takes between 54 and 61 hours, and the train regularly extends to over a kilometer in length, the longest passenger service in Australia by a significant margin. In May 2016, a special working reached 1.7 kilometers. The train is named after the Afghan cameleers, who opened the interior of Australia to commercial activity before the first tracks were laid in 1878. Those cameleers used the mound springs along John McDouall Stewart's 1862 route as water sources, and the original narrow gauge line followed the same corridor for the same reason. Steam locomotives required water at regular intervals, and in Central Australia, water exists in specific places. That dependency tied the original line to terrain prone to flash flooding, and the old Ghan became notorious for washouts that could strand passengers for weeks. The modern Ghan runs on a standard gauge line completed in 1980, rerouted to a drier corridor further west. The final section to Darwin was finished in 2004, closing a gap that had been discussed since the 1880s. The train stops at Alice Springs and Catherine, where passengers disembark for excursions into a desert environment that has no road access from the south for most of the year. TranzAlpine. The TranzAlpine crosses the South Island of New Zealand from Christchurch on the Pacific coast to Greymouth on the Tasman Sea, a distance of 223 kilometers. That takes 4.5 hours and crosses a major tectonic boundary. The Southern Alps were formed by the collision of the Pacific and Australian plates and are still rising. The rivers that drain the eastern slopes, including the Waimakariri, which the train follows for a significant portion of the journey, are braided, meaning they spread across wide shingle beds in constantly shifting channels because the mountains are feeding them faster than they can carry the sediment to sea. The key engineering challenge was the Otira Tunnel, which bores through the main divide of the Southern Alps for 8.5 kilometers. Drilling began in 1908 and took 15 years. When the 2 crews, advancing from opposite sides of the mountain, met in the middle, the alignment error was less than 1 centimeter. At the time of its completion, in 1923, it was the second longest railway tunnel in the world. The journey compresses a geological transformation into a single morning. Passengers board in the dry golden grasslands of the Canterbury Plains, enter the tunnel, and emerge on the west coast into temperate rainforest, receiving over 5 meters of annual rainfall. The same mountain range responsible for that contrast is also the reason the tunnel was necessary. Golden Pass Line. The Golden Pass Line connects Montreux on Lake Geneva to Lucerne, covering 192 kilometers through Swiss Lake country, the Bernese Oberland, and the Alpine foothills that separate the French and German-speaking regions of Switzerland. For over a century, the journey required passengers to change trains at Zweisimmen because the Montreux to Zweisimmen section was built to meter gauge, while the onward route to Interlaken operated on standard gauge of 1,435 millimeters. 2 different track widths, 1 unresolved gap. The solution arrived in December 2022 with the Golden Pass Express and a piece of engineering called the EV18 variable gauge bogie. At Zweisimmen, the train rolls slowly through a gauge-changing facility where the wheel axles slide outward from meter gauge to standard gauge without the passengers leaving their seats. The platform height adjusts simultaneously. The locomotive is swapped because engines do not change gauge, only the coaches do. What had been an inconvenience requiring luggage transfers and separate ticketing became a 90-second mechanical procedure. Rocky Mountaineer. The Rocky Mountaineer operates entirely in daylight. The train runs between Vancouver and Banff or Lake Louise through the Canadian Rockies, and rather than provide sleeper accommodation, It stops each night in Kamloops, while passengers stay in hotels. The decision is not logistical. It is a statement that the route between those 2 points contains nothing worth missing, and that the correct response to that is to simply not be asleep for any of it. The Goldleaf service places passengers on the upper level of a bi-level glass dome carriage, with a dining room below. The windows curve overhead. The observation deck at the end of the carriage is open to outside air. The route follows the 1885 Canadian Pacific Line, passing the Craigelachie Monument, where the final spike of the Transcontinental Railway was driven on 7th November, 1885. The most concentrated engineering on the route is the spiral tunnels at Kicking Horse Pass. To reduce the grade from 45 per mil to a manageable 22 per mil, engineers built 2 tunnels that loop inside separate mountains in figure-8 configurations. A train long enough can be simultaneously entering and exiting the same tunnel. The front of the train is visible from the rear as both sections occupy the same mountain at different altitudes. Kandy to Ella. The train from Kandy to Ella climbs from 488 meters above sea level into the Sri Lankan highlands, passing through tea country that the British colonial administration built the railway to access in the mid-19th century. The journey covers between 140 and 160 kilometers, depending on the route variant taken, and it takes between 6 and 7 hours because the line curves continuously through a landscape that offers no straight sections of any meaningful length. The tea estates begin appearing after Peradeniya and do not stop. The train moves through a green that has no equivalent at lower altitudes, a combination of elevation, moisture, and the specific color of tea bush canopy seen from a carriage window with the mountain air coming through it. At Nanu Oya, the nearest station to Nuwara Eliya, the altitude reaches 1,888 meters, and the temperature drops to conditions the British settlers called Little England. The route's defining structure is the 9 Arches Bridge between Ella and Demadara. It was built during the First World War, when a steel shipment from Britain was redirected for military use. Local engineers constructed the bridge entirely from stone, brick, and cement, producing a viaduct that has stood without modification for over a century. The Kandy to Ella line remains a functioning public railway. It carries school children and vegetable sellers and workers alongside tourists who have flown from the other side of the planet specifically to ride it. You can't beat a view through an open door coming in at 30 kilometers per hour.